Good morning, everyone, and welcome as we're coming in. Good morning, everybody who's just logging on. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're going to give it a few minutes here for at the beginning just for people to log on. But welcome and thank you. All right, it's 10:01. I'll go ahead and open and start with just a few meeting logistics. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. My name is Kevin Caudill. I'm Councilmember Fruman's Communications Director. Thanks so much for taking the time from your Saturday to join us. If you look in your chat function, the general group chat, I have put the meeting logistics in there as well if you'd like to follow along. We are recording this meeting, so afterwards, you can find this on our website, mattfrumanward3.com. It will also be on our YouTube page, and the handle for that is @CMFruman. Today, to request to speak, so I know a lot of people will be just listening, but if you would like to speak today, please use the raise your hand function icon at the bottom of your screen, and that yellow hand will appear in the upper left corner of your screen to confirm that your hand's raised. And then after speaking, if you'd please remember to lower that hand so we can get to the next person. A reminder, Zoom does provide closed captions for those that need it, so you can click that CC icon to show captions in the bottom. We're going to go in order of those who raise their hand. So when it is your turn, I will allow you to unmute, and then I'll identify you and you all will be able to speak. We're scheduled to go until noon. So out of respect for everyone, we do ask that speakers try to limit your comments to 2 to 3 minutes. So we have give everyone a chance who wants to speak a chance to do so. We'll do that kind of similar to how we do a hearing, where we'll hear from a few speakers at a time, and then Councilmember Fruman will take a moment to respond, then we'll continue to the next speakers. My last flags I just want to say about the chat. For those of us running the meeting and speaking, it can be easy for the host to miss the general chat function. So you're welcome to use that, but if participants do have questions that you don't want to necessarily ask live, but would want discussed, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions there. It's easier for us to track than the group chat function. Similarly, if you have technical troubleshooting, please send me a direct message. Kevin Caudill is the name on there, as opposed to the general function to everybody. Again, it's just easier for us to identify that. But again, you're welcome to use the chat just for those direct messages if you please to use those other functions. Last thing before we begin, I want to flag the resources button on your screen too. If you click that under the links, I've included a link to our website, and under the documents, there's a copy of our annual report for 2024 to download and view. And so that's a compilation of some of last year's highlights and key accomplishments. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Councilmember Fruman. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for getting this all set up and really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody who's come out. We have a big crowd, which is wonderful. This is a thing that we've done each year. This is now our third, and it's worked really well in the past as a way of getting input as we come into the budget season, hearing from folks in the ward about what are their highest priorities and what they want to see me be focused on in the budget cycle. It's obviously going to be a challenging budget cycle, but in one we really need to step up on, and also for me need to be pretty strategic about trying to achieve goals for the ward. Big things in the ward are unlikely to be on the horizon in this cycle, but there are targeted things that I am optimistic that we'll be able to achieve. And I want to hear from you about what kinds of things you'd like to see me focus on. For me, I've assumed the chairmanship of the Committee on Human Services with jurisdiction over the Department of Human Services, the DC Public Libraries, the Office of Cable Television, among other things. The This new role has a lot of responsibility. The Department of Human Services is ERAP, it's vouchers, it's SNAP, it's truancy in the schools. It's a very big agency that has had real challenges, and so I'm going to bring everything I got to try to do the best job that I can in this role. Um, I do feel it as a sort of heavyweight of responsibility, but also really an opportunity to make a positive difference. So there may be folks on here who want to talk about the things in my portfolio generally. Um, for me, every year is about schools. I think we've done well so far to try to make sure that our schools are fully funded. That has been a very high priority for me already for months, but there's going to be a lot more to it coming forward. Increasing public safety, making housing more accessible and affordable, all critical for me. Um, where we are in this process is that the the mayor and her team have been looking at internally at the budgets for the different agencies for months. The mayor goes and asks the agencies to come back and tell her what they need, what they would do if they had minor cuts, what they would do if they had extra dollars. That process has been going on internally for some time. And in that process, I don't sit on my hands. I've been reaching out to the different agencies about things that are priorities for months on this budget process. But then we will begin the oversight process. We're going to be starting oversight hearings in the next week. I will, my biggest one is the Department of Human Services oversight hearing. Because I'm new to the committee, we decided to put that at the very end. So that'll be on March 7th. But watch the calendar. We will be posting things through our newsletter about the calendar for different hearings. Come out, testify on things that you think are critically important. The the real kickoff starts soon. The CFO is going to come out with um, the comprehensive annual financial report, which will tell us where we are financially within the next week or so, I believe. And then at the end of February, the CFO will issue the revenue estimate um, based on the most recent trends in the economy that will be the basis for the budgets that we pass. And what the CFO's revenue estimate becomes the ceiling on what we can spend. We have to balance the budget, and so that gives us, in a sense, our budget mark. Um, and what's been happening there is, and you may have seen it in the press, there were downward revisions, modest downward revisions in expectations, but really in the last couple of CFO revenue estimates, it's been flat. And I don't know whether we can expect the next revenue estimate to be flat. It's a little bit better of a situation than we had last year, but we have giant challenges funding for WMATA and other different kinds of things that are going to be challenges in this process. Once the CFO's revenue estimate comes out, the mayor finalizes her budget. She releases it, I think it's April 2nd this year. Then we'll see what it is that she's going to do. Before she does that, one of the things that we do each year is we send her a letter. I think our goal is to send her a letter in the next weeks with things that are our priorities that we'd like to see her fund. That's part of the reason we do this, is to be informed by your input in what we put into that letter. Then the mayor's budget comes out in April, and we go through hearings, agency by agency hearings on the budget. And then the committees each make revisions to the budget. Chairman Mendelson pulls all of those committee reports together and puts together a complete revised budget that the council votes on twice, and there can be changes from what he proposes on the first, before the first vote, and then between a first and a second vote. That all happens in May. So we're actually in the middle, because there's been a lot of work that's been happening for months, but there's going to be a process that goes on for the next 4 months where we wrestle this challenging budget down and try to make sure it expresses our values as well as we can. And so with that, I want to turn it over to folks in the audience to talk about the things that are the highest priorities for them, that they want to make sure are on the mind of our staff as me and our staff, as we move forward, trying to put together our recommendations on the budget and then response to the mayor's budget.
Great, thanks, council member. And so, folks, again, for those just jumping on, what we'll do is if you do want to speak, please raise your hand, use the raise your hand function there at the bottom of your screen, and I will then promote you and allow you to speak. We have a few folks who raised their hand first, so I'm going to start. I see Karen on my screen first. So Karen, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute, and then Lori and Justin will go to you guys next.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to talk this morning about next year's budget. My focus today is on meeting the needs of our growing population of older adults. I have been involved in senior-focused activities as a member and volunteer for Northwest Neighbors Village, a participant in Around Town DC classes, a member of the Task Force on Senior Wellness Centers for Ward 2 and 3, and as a member of the Commission on Aging. I feel fortunate to live in a community that has great organizations, Iona, Around Town DC, and the villages that facilitate healthy aging and assist us as our needs change. However, these organizations receive some of their funding, as in the case in villages, and in the case of Iona and Around Town DC, most of their funding from the Department of Aging and Community Living. It is essential that these organizations receive adequate funding. Many of the programs that help older adults stay active and connected, and help when changes in physical or cognitive health require intervention. We can expect demand for these services to increase as the baby boom generation ages. I know that you have supported these priorities and encourage you to expand your support to meet the expanding demand. Importantly, we need to see that funding for design and construction of a senior wellness center in our ward is funded in the capital budget, and that a planned feasibility study proceed as quickly as possible in Ward 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Lori, I see you next on my screen. Lori, if you'd like to unmute.
Yes. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm Lori Levy from AU Park, and my major concern right now is the new municipal bond tax that was added in the last budget cycle. I know that Councilmember Fruman, along with Council members Pinto and Henderson, introduced an amendment near the end of the last session to exempt bonds, excuse me, that were purchased before the end of 2024, to exempt their interest from the new tax. As I think you know, the majority of DC municipal bond holders are older and retired, and many of them, like myself, have built their retirement strategies around these bonds, precisely because DC had never taxed them. But as far as I know, that amendment was never acted upon, and as of January 1st, the new tax is in effect, and those of us who make estimated tax payments will start having to pony up a much increased amount in April. So basically, this is a three-part question. First, to the council member, are you and your co-sponsors planning to reintroduce the amendment bill and call for a public hearing, which we didn't get the last time? Secondly, are you planning to make an effort to identify alternative sources of funding, revenues or cost savings? Because we citizens simply don't have the expertise or the resources to to find that kind of information. But we do know that without some sort of offset, this amendment wouldn't stand a chance. And then finally, I appreciate that in the past you've highlighted the bond issue in your constituent newsletter. And I'm wondering if the amendment is reintroduced, and a hearing is scheduled, can we count on you to again feature that prominently in your constituent newsletter, and perhaps ask your co-sponsors to do that as well? And then suggest perhaps in that newsletter that citizen involvement would be very critical to its passage. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Next up, Justin, if you'd like to unmute Justin, and then we'll go to Catherine. Catherine, if you'd like to be ready on deck.
Sure. Thanks so much, Mr. Caudell. Pleasure to be here with you today. And I think this is very valuable, this type of session and discussion with Councilmember Fruman. I, like maybe 100 or so other DC residents, I was a volunteer on the Initiative 83 campaign. And a lot of us are really wondering what type of leadership are we going to see from the DC City Council? The voters spoke, the debate is concluded. 212,000 voters in DC came out and voted for having a semi-open primary system where independents will be able to vote in DC primaries, and also having ranked choice voting. It was important because this was a sort of nationwide test. There were races in a number of different states. DC and Alaska were the two states which kind of reaffirmed the importance of trying out this new way of voting to introduce ranked choice voting in the district. So the voters are very clear. It passed with majorities in every single ward, every single precinct across the district was in support of this initiative. So I think it would be valuable to hear, this is a very minor budget item, $1.5 billion over a few years for education of voters about how to do ranked choice voting, which is critical towards its success. I'd like to hear a little bit from the council member about the chances for funding this particular item. It will go nowhere unless it's funded, unless the Board of Elections has adequate funding in order to be able to implement ranked choice voting in our next election in Washington, D.C. So it's a minor budget item, but I think it has overall a significant level of importance in terms of improving quality of our democracy and making sure that candidates have a majority support. I think it's interesting, 212,000 people voted for Initiative 83. Only 161,000 people voted for Commissioner Phil Mendelson or Chairman Phil Mendelson in the last election. So I don't think there's any strong basis upon which the council should oppose funding $1.5 million to implement Initiative 83 in the coming election. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Justin. Councilmember, we'll do one more, Catherine, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute, and then we'll pause for a response.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
we
Oh,
can.
good. Thank you. Sorry, my headphones are a little wonky these days. Good morning. My name is Catherine Lanfield. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a resident of Tenley Town and have been living in Ward 3 for decades now. I'm very concerned about rising inequality in DC. As a member of DC's wealthiest and not coincidentally whitest ward, I think it's super important that we find ways to be thinking about Ward 3 as an interconnected part of DC and thinking about the well-being of all communities as interconnected. I'm thinking about the first speaker who raised the issue of seniors. We can't think of groups of people as being somehow outside of the interconnected wellness of the city. And I think that means not accepting a significant lack of housing affordability, particularly here in Ward 3, not accepting growing homelessness, growing domestic violence rates, and stagnant wages for workers. There's so much we can do. I'm really excited for you to be leading the Committee on Human Services. I understand it is a heavy heavy topic, but I feel like you're also very well suited to it. You've been working on citywide issues, particularly through your schoolwork, but also housing for decades, and I think that'll be really helpful. Um, and I want to really urge you to resist an austerity mindset. We need an economy that focuses on shared prosperity and shared abundance. And austerity budgeting, which the mayor is already signaling is going to be what she does, always has harmed those who are already most vulnerable. Um, always, it has never once anywhere worked, and trickle down does not work. And as I said, communities are deeply interconnected. By increasing taxes on the very highest income residents, increasing taxes on capital gains of the extremely wealthy, and implementing a business activity tax, which closes a loophole on the wealthy partnerships that currently pay no business taxes to DC. I think we can make our tax system more capable of meeting the needs of residents. We don't have to accept an austerity mindset and an austerity budget. As always, I hope you'll protect and strengthen the childcare sector, which is so important to workers, whether they're high income, middle income, or low income, and the Pay Equity Fund. And I think you may know that I'm the mother of a preschool teacher, so I do have a personal stake in this. And my questions for you, please, are how will you ensure that we don't go the route of austerity? And how do you view changes for a more effective tax system that adequately funds the needs of communities across the city? Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm going to take a couple minutes to respond to the four. Really, really appreciate it. I'm going to go a little out of order because two kind of come together. But so Karen, totally hear you on the issues around seniors and the Senior Wellness Center. Um, we're reaching out to DACL now about these issues and others in the administration. The funding for the villages last year, we were successful in getting a plus up for the villages. Um, there's lots of things out there where you don't want to claim credit for it because lots of people were involved. That happens to be one where I'm going to claim credit for it. Keeping fully funding the villages, fully funding Iona, very, very important. High on our list of priorities. Around town DC, I always envisioned it as, because I worked with Sally White to conceive of that program. We always envisioned it as a pilot program. Would love to see that kind of thing happen in other wards as well. That's a thing I raise frequently. The 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 fact that the Senior Wellness Center process has stalled is troubling, and that's a thing that I'm going to be digging into in the oversight process. We need to shake it loose. We need to make it happen, and I'll do what I can to try to make that happen. Justin, on I-83, I think there's only two of us who are unequivocal supporters of I-83. I have said whenever asked, I support it. I have said whenever asked, I support funding it. I do want to be real about, and I think you get it. I think everybody gets it. I think the mayor, it's been pretty clear, the mayor's not going to fund it. Then it's going to come over to, will be an Anita Bonds committee. I doubt Anita Bonds is going to fund it. And then the question is, will Phil Mendelson fund it when the budget comes over to him? And he was on Kojo yesterday and sort of didn't answer the question, I thought. But I'm skeptical that he will. And then I think it will fall to Christina and I, who's the other person who have been unequivocal supporters, to try to find a way to fund it that gets 7 votes. And so I don't know where that's all going to go, but I do support it, want to see it happen. I think the political landscape is challenging. And I don't want to pretend otherwise, but I am an unequivocal supporter. You're right. The people have spoken. I think it can get to a better system, and I want to try to be a part of making it happen. Lori on the municipal bonds and Catherine on taxes more generally. I'll kind of come at these together. So I did last year in the budget process a, a pretty big essay about how I saw taxes and how I saw a way to get to more greater equity in the tax setting, because the way in which our taxes work is folks who make up to like $100,000 a year, maybe it's higher than that, maybe it's $250,000 a year, pay about 12% of their income overall in taxes of different forms, and then it comes down for higher incomes. It actually dips between, I think, like 250 and 500, and then comes up over 500. If you go back to our newsletters, you can find the exact data. And I think the idea that everybody should, at a minimum, bear the same burden. I know, Catherine, you'd like to see a higher amount, but I think the idea that everybody should bear a similar burden and the highest income people should bear a similar burden. I'm sympathetic to that idea. Um, I don't, there were tax increases last year. I'm skeptical there's an appetite for tax increases this year. We'll see how that all goes. But we'll see. The municipal bond tax, which came up last year as part of the tax increases, I did think was the wrong way to do it. It was the wrong place to go. And then I agree that I don't think that it was fair to seniors, and that's why, Lori, I was one of the introducers of the amendment to, in effect, grandfather it. And that uh, the relevant committee declined to have a hearing on it. We now need to reintroduce it, which is going to happen. I need to check on it. We need to check where that stands. My impression is it was going to be reintroduced. Um, and and then we'll see whether it gets a hearing or whether it's a thing that can be embraced through a Budget Support Act. I've talked with the mayor about this, talked with others about this. You do have to find a way to pay for it. And it takes me into some of the other things that people talk about in the tax space. One of the things that I've been talking about for some time is a pied-à-terre tax. We have folks who live in the district for one day less than 6 months and have residence in a no tax environment. And so they don't pay taxes here, but they're here for half of the year. And I think there should be a way. They're benefiting from all of our services. I think there should be a way to increase the burden on them. I think the way to do it is through the property taxes. And so that's a thing that we're looking at ideas around, which could bring some new revenue and could be a way of offsetting something, things like the municipal bond tax, and also generating additional dollars for other needs. And then Catherine raised the business activity tax, and that is an idea. I don't want to spend too much time because we have limited time together, but it's a different way of taxing our businesses that captures income earned by folks outside of the district. Um, and that, I think, is a very important idea that was working its way through the Tax Revision Commission, and then the Tax Revision Commission collapsed around that idea, and was unable to make recommendations. Instead, what happened was we raised the payroll tax that's related to family leave to use those dollars for general purposes, which is a blunter instrument than the business activity tax. And I think we need to get back to thinking about moving to a business activity tax, get to where we're getting tax revenue from folks who work in the district but live outside of it, as part of the way that we address our longer term issues. And then I guess the last thing, I hope I've responded to everyone, but the last thing was the support for the child care sector, like a very, very high priority. Not just that there was the pay equity fund, worried about what the mayor will do around the pay equity fund. The council will be determined to fix it. Some of you might be familiar with the PKEEP program, which is critical to it's a critical part of our overall infrastructure to serve 3- and 4-year-olds. That people didn't realize how at risk PKEEP was last year, but we were able to get it turned around and funded. But I promise you that will be a very high priority for us in the budget process. So I'll stop with that and we can hear from the next group.
Great. I'll take a brief moment for those who joined late. Just a reminder, the logistics should be in the chat. And then if you'll raise your hand if you want to speak. If you have a question you don't want to ask live but want answered, if you'll put it in the Q&A function. Again, for those of us running the meeting, it's just harder to follow the general chat, even though you are welcome to use it. It is enabled now. I will promote you to speak when you're ready to. I have 8 people ready to raise their hand. I've got a couple waiting. I'll just flag, Anne, you declined my offer to promote you. So if you do want to speak, I'll ask again and you can do that. But I have Sal on and ready to go. So Sal, will go to you.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Matt, for arranging this. I think it's very important. So I'm a member of the Iona Citizen Advisory Group, as you know, and actually I know that you had previously been on the Citizen Advisory Group for Iona. And you've already answered many of the questions that Karen Zuckerstein had involving our older community. So my question for you actually is, what strategies have you found to be effective in addressing and advocating to the council and to the mayor for issues that we would like to have them act upon? So that's really my main question.
Great, thanks, Sal. So Anne, you did get in, so thank you for doing that. We'll go to Kesh first. Kesh, if you'd like to unmute now, and then Anne, you'll be on deck.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, council member, for inviting us to this listening session. And congratulations on chairing your new committee, as challenging as it is. So Justin did an excellent job of explaining the importance of Initiative 83, which is my interest as well. And I appreciate your candor, council member, about the political realities. I think I really hear what you're saying. I want to just sort of stress the fact that whatever the budget challenges are, this is not like any other program. It's the only program that DC voters specifically voted for in overwhelming numbers this November. It's also gotten around that the cost of Initiative 83, 1.5 million over 4 years, is the same cost as was expensed on the inauguration viewing stand that basically was there for just one day and not even used in the end. And also the fact that our government is making a lot of having to resist the Trump administration's incursions on our democracy, but it would be just unbelievable if the council did not actually go through and implement this initiative that the voters voted for. So I truly appreciate your support for this and your leadership, and I look forward, and we're going to really need to rely on you. And of course, we'll be happy to give you all the support that you need. But I just think that this is really a test for the council at a time when we're talking about the dangers of democracy from the Trump administration if the council fails to fund this. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kesh. Thank you so much. And Anne, we have you ready to go if you'd like to unmute.
Thank you so much for having this session. My big concern is the environment and particularly fighting climate change. And for at least the last 2 years and maybe more, the mayor has taken money from environmental programs and tried to destroy BEPS in the budget process. And I know you're one of the people who fought back last year, and I hope you're going to be fighting back this year. Also, while I can only speak for myself, I think you're well aware that the Ward 3 Democratic Committee has taken a very strong stand on environmental issues and wanting to fight climate change. I also agree with the speakers who raised tax issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And I can do one more. We don't have William, you'd be up next, or council member. If you'd like to go ahead and pause now, that'd be fine too. William, though, or go ahead, council member.
Okay. All right. So Sal, great. First of all, everybody who's spoken so far, it's been very active in so many different ways, and really grateful. And I'm sure this will be true for the other people who come on next. But thank you for everything that you do. On the strategies to advocate with the mayor and council, one of the things, the mayor's big budget meetings in some ways feel like a show, and it could be anomalous, but 2 years ago, the pickleball people turned up and pickleball wasn't on the map, and they put it on the map, and mayor never heard about it. The mayor heard about it. So I do think coming in force to those meetings is a moment where you can get her attention. And so I think that's one thing, and maybe a surprising thing. And there is the stuff that happens on the stage and at the tables, but there's also the agency heads who are there. And so buttonholing people at those sessions, I think, is a useful strategy. If they hear me saying that, then I'll hear about it. But I think that that's a useful strategy. Email campaigns can be useful, but we get so many emails on so many different things. I don't want to discourage you from doing email things, but I would encourage you, instead of like mass email pushes, individual emails from people who have been active on the issues directly, one at a time, to people. Because the mass emails, I don't think that they have the same kind of impact, but the personal ones, I think, do have more of an impact. And then turning up at the hearings, and there was an interesting conversation around the rules that we just passed, because Chairman Mendelson proposed adding a rule that that the chair would have the authority to cut off testimony from multiple members from the same organization. And the idea of that was, we've had hearings where 30 people turn up and they say the exact same thing. And I think from the advocate's perspective, it's a show of numbers. But in at least one case, it turned into something that was more irritating than productive. And so again, in the testimony space, I think you want to have a number of people come out, but you don't want them to say the same thing. You want them to be coming at it from a different perspective. And there's such a thing as overdoing it where it's becoming counterproductive. So I don't know. I hope that is helpful. I think another thing is that, Sal, for you working in Ward 3 and advocating for Ward 3, I love it when people from Ward 3 come out and advocate. The most effective advocacy for Ward 3 is one that pulls on the theme that Catherine in the last panel raised, which is interconnectedness. If you're helping Iona, if you're helping the lead agencies, you're helping the lead agencies in every part of the city, and having advocates from all parts of the city be a part of the same push, I think is very, very important. Same is true on the villages. And on the villages space, I think part of the advocacy should be we need to support the villages we have, but we also need to fill in the gaps where there are not villages in some parts of the city. So to the extent that the advocacy can be citywide, it's stronger. Kish, on I-83, somebody asked, is it really only Christina and I who have unequivocally advocated, shown support? It could be others have, but in the most recent press story, I was surprised. Somebody sort of counted noses, and there were comments from some people and no comments from others. But the only two people who said, yes, we support it and we want to fund it were Christina and I. I think I'll digress for a second here, because I think it's interesting that it's the progressive communication that I think you're a part of that's the strongest advocates for I-83. I actually think what it's going to do is pull the district electorate to some extent to the right, because by adding independents into the mix in the Democratic primary, it's a kind of broader ideological spectrum that you need to appeal to. I think that's a healthy thing, but I think it's interesting that it's the progressive community that has been the most ardent advocates for it. I'd also say, from my perspective, I support it, 100% support it, want to see it funded. I think it hurts me. I think in earlier elections, I was always people's second choice. If I wasn't their first choice, I was their second choice. As an incumbent, I'm not sure I'm going to be anybody's second choice. So they'll either support me or they'll want somebody different than me. So I'm not sure that it is in my personal self-interest, but I think it's the right thing. And so I'm going to support it every way I can. And on the environment, really, really pleased by the introduction of the bottle bill. You're right on the way the budget is going to work. The mayor is gonna cut stuff supporting our response to climate change. I wouldn't be surprised if she tried again. Last year, she tried a 3-year pause to BEPS. We can make, on BEPS, I do think we can make BEPS work better. And there is a task force that works on it. And there were a set of fixes that a cross section of people came up with, from the building world and the environmental world. And I think that's the way we go, not the kind of broad brush pause, but watching as we're implementing this really important, really big program to see if there are things that we need to do in order to make sure it works and is fair. I will 100% be a part of trying to respond to those things. I guess, as one example, in effect, there were cuts to the green bank in the mayor's budget, and every dollar we spend through the green bank has something like $10 of accelerator effect. This is a really important area, and one that's good for the economy and good for the city and good for the world. And so going to be with that, I guess we can turn to the next panel.
Great. So again, folks, when you would like to speak, use the raise your hand function. I've got 7 waiting, and William and Alan, I'm going to ask again if you guys would like to be promoted to speak. But in the meantime, I have Christina ready to go. So Christina, you can unmute.
Hi, good morning. I'm the mother of a pre-K 3-year, and she's currently enrolled in the French immersion course at CommuniKids. And thank goodness for that, because there's very few pre-K 3 schools and no DC public schools pre-K 3 in the Ward 3 area. And last year I was a government employee, and I had the advantage of a subsidy to pay for her pre-K 2 from January of 2024 to June of 2024 at Community Kids for the Spanish immersion. And the subsidy allowed me to covered half of the enrollment for those 6 months. And then I tapped out. I wasn't able to use any more subsidy because it caps out at $5,000. But that helped a lot. And so my concern is that if Mayor Browser once again cuts the compensation for early childhood educators, it will drive workers out of the field to higher paying jobs, increase childcare costs for families, and negatively impact parents who rely on childcare to go to work, ultimately hurting employers and the local economy. And when she was, before January 2024, when she was 2, I was utilizing the DC, what's called a social care program, because they don't do daycare. They made it a point that they don't do daycare. So therefore I couldn't use the subsidy for the DC social care program that is offered for 2-year-olds. And the problem with those programs is that it's very much dependent on the parents, and the DC employees that are there are not participating to the level that you would expect someone to actually be participating. And they vary. Some are better than others. And when I was hearing the concerns earlier about the senior and aging issues, I was wondering, how come we don't see more integration between early education and senior assistance? Because there are a lot of programs here in the United States, as well as elsewhere internationally, where you have integration between elderly and the early education. And it would make sense to me, so that if you had, so a lot of these DC social care programs, the nannies of the parents are the ones that end up showing up as the quote parent that's supposed to be on duty. And the nannies pay attention to their child, not the entire class. Whereas the goal of these social cares, the DC public social care groups that they have, there's the parent on duty is supposed to be helping out with the entire class. And now, if grandparents were coming in, if grandparents were invited in and targeted as people who could help instead of nannies or working parents, it would provide both the ability to integrate seniors into the society and create more of these village collaborations that you're looking for. So that's my help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christina. Ronald, I see you're ready to go on screen. Thanks so much. And if you'd like to go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. And I appreciate the opportunity in the budget listening session. And my name is Ronald Kahn. I live in ANC 34G. And I'm going to cover a couple different areas that haven't been discussed, if that's okay. I understand that the 2025 has a major update to the comprehensive plan that's scheduled. I don't know if that can be confirmed, but I'd like to support or put some funding in there to perhaps also update our small area plan that's related to the comp plan process. I'm not going to detail the reasons why, but there are reasons. And I'm hoping maybe that can be addressed as a budget objective in the near term, since it's a 2025. It's called a major update too, as compared to the 2020 process, which seemed like a major effort. Another area I'd like to get addressed in terms of potential funding is we've left some things on the table related to Connecticut Avenue. that can be done for the safety and transit purposes. And again, there's a list of things that can be done that weren't done or left on the table from a Connecticut Avenue specific objectives thing again. So I'm looking to say if maybe some funding could be appropriated to study that or do more than that going forward. So I'd appreciate that. Again, there's reasons or details, but I don't want to take up more of your time other than mention that, okay? And there's things called kind of expertise funding. What I'd like to do is see if the CFO can do a more comprehensive or a more complete job with their fiscal impact studies than have been done. Right now, they're only required for legislation, and they could be more extensively done in other efforts legislatively or regulation related that could be more efficiently identifying, the effort in terms of their expertise that they supply on the validity of various legislation. And I'd also like to see if they could put funding into something called zero-based budgeting, which is a far improved method for doing budgeting that gives you much more discipline in the budget process that I think, given the constraints, that process might be something that the budget office wants to take a look at. I also want to take a look in funding. Can we do a sub-precinct police station in Chevy Chase? Is that at all worthwhile taking a look at? I agree with what I've heard in terms of the health needs, and I'd like to see a local health clinic if that could be facilitated in the Chevy Chase area as well, along with some type of more concentration of senior center services in the Chevy Chase area. That's it for me. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ronald. So, William, I see you on screen, and I have you ready to go. William, you can go right ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, council member. Thank you, Kevin. It's good to see you, council member. I'm speaking in connection with the project being pursued by a group known as the Coalition to Save the Trolley Trestle. It's a historic preservation and transportation issue that focuses on a historic trestle that goes between the Georgetown campus, what is now the Georgetown campus, and the Foxhall Village neighborhood. The trestle itself has an interesting history. It hasn't been used since 1960. The reason it was closed was that when the Glen Echo Park was desegregated in 1960, the trolley company closed the trolley to fight that effort. I'll stay away from that because we have a relatively modest ask going forward. The coalition is working to refurbish the trestle, which has not been used in decades, so that it would be a transit for pedestrians and bikes going between Georgetown and Palisades across Glover Archibald Park. The coalition is working on the funding that for the refurbishment. That's not what I'm here to ask about. But in order to do that, there is a timing issue where we could use the council's help. There is a risk that the trestle will be demolished before we can raise the funds needed to refurbish it. There is a relatively modest project that we're working on that would involve building construction of scaffolding under the trestle. The purpose of the scaffolding would be to allow hikers who use Glover Archibald Park to go under this trestle safely. This would cost on the order of tens of thousands of dollars, not bigger amounts. But we would need to do it relatively soon to avoid WMATA and others going forward with demolition projects. We'll be following up with details later, but we wanted to get this on your agenda and appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Thanks so much, William. Alan, we've got you on deck. Alan, and then we'll pause for response.
Yes, I assume you can hear me. It's Alan Weinstein. I live on Devonshire Place on the corner of Devonshire and Connecticut. I have two issues for Councilman Fruman. One, I've discussed with him in the past, and one a new one. The new one is a rather large issue. It has to do with taxing a new retirement function resources for retirees on a pension. Many other states make that pension income tax free in order to keep seniors living in their particular tax jurisdiction. Seniors are relatively small, make relatively small demands on the revenue. We don't have any kids in school, etc. So some jurisdictions allow the retirement pension to be tax free. I've discussed it with your predecessor, and she flatly refused to consider it. I'm wondering if you had given this any thought. I'm not a one-issue voter. I will not vote against you if you say you're not interested, but I'd like to know your position. And item two is an issue that I think I've discussed with you many times, having to do with how the property tax people evaluate the income from people, whether they use the federal income tax return to determine if you qualify for the senior exemption, or whether you use the city income tax term. We've discussed this many times, Councilman, and I'm wondering where this stands. So those are my two questions.
Okay, great. So I will respond. I think I'm gonna go in reverse order. Alan, we have legislation on the adjusted gross income issue that we're planning to roll out. I think it's a teeny impact, but it has an impact on a small number of people. And that, for those who are listening, for the DC exemption, we use the federal adjusted gross income as opposed to the DC adjusted gross income today, and we should use our own adjusted gross income. So working on fixing that. I don't know where it'll go, but we do have a draft of legislation. On the state pension issue, I think this is one I've responded to in campaigns on. I'm supportive of the idea. I mean, this is a time where being supportive of current and former government workers feels like an important thing. And so I think I'm on record on this. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I believe I'm on record on that. William, on the trolley trestle, I've reached out to WMATA, reached out to the National Park Service, have been talking about an approach that comes out of the Historic Preservation League about trying to create a mechanism to raise funds to save the trestle. I'd really like to see us save the trestle. I totally get it that the clock is ticking, and I'm trying to create a rubric where we have one last chance to do the kind of thing that you're talking about, to raise the money to try to save the trestle. Somebody from the National Park Service, I've reached out to WMATA a couple times on this. Somebody from the National Park Service reached out to me this week to ask where it stood. I raised it with the Park Service 2 weeks ago, trying to buy that time so that we can save this. Please do reach out about the scaffolding thing that you're talking about. I think I might have heard something about that, but I haven't been part of those conversations, and I think I need to understand what it is that you're trying to do and how it fits in. The other thing that fits into this is that Georgetown, in the past, Georgetown University has been an opponent of saving the trestle. Georgetown University's position appears to have changed. They've brought together stakeholders trying to get into a position where they could make a statement in favor of saving the trestle. I hope that is a thing that can happen soon, because again, the timing issue is important. But that is a priority for me to try to get this saved, and there will be a budget element to that, because the way I understand it from the Preservation League, it shouldn't take a lot of money, and the city is unlikely to be willing to pay for all of it, but could the city set up some kind of a matching rubric as part of Save the Trust? And reach out on the scaffolding. Ronald, a whole bunch of ideas there and good ones. Let me see if I can check through them. The comp plan, they do talk about the 2025 comp plan as being a major revision. But I actually think that some of the things that folks on zoning, the big changes that they proposed on zoning in the last comp plan process, I don't think they're going to revisit those. Part of the way that they're talking about it is that they want to simplify the plan. And so it's a rewrite as opposed to an amendment. I think one of the issues, and I think they foreshadowed this, is whether there would be any changes to single family zoning anywhere. Not trying to create a panic that there will be a broad prohibition on single family zoning, but I think there will be a conversation in that comp plan processes about, are there places where there is single family zoning that could allow for more density. But I think it's that kind of conversation that is going to be the main thing there. One of the things that I hear all the time is a small house in a neighborhood will be purchased. Somebody will come in and they will build a house that is giant. And all of the neighbors are unhappy about it. And I think I don't know, this is going to be a conversation that we have in 2025, but I wonder whether people would prefer to see two modest duplex as opposed to a giant McMansion going on sites like that. But I think that's the kind of thing that will be out there and part of the conversation. The small area plans, you could change the small area plan process, but I don't think you go back. There will be a going back to revisit small area plans. On Connecticut Avenue, I just this last week sent letters to a bunch of agency heads about issues that would be on my mind in the oversight and budget process to try to set up meetings. And in my letter to DDOT Director Kirschbaum, one of the questions is, where are you on Connecticut Avenue? You're right, there are things that had been talked about, and I don't know where that stands. The oversight process becomes an opportunity to learn, to see where they're at, and so I'm actively trying to understand that right now. On this, I'm going to put together the CFO fiscal impact, zero-based budgeting. There are some big ideas out there about how we might approach things somewhat differently. And I put it all under the basket of the council strengthening its research capacity. And there are a lot of folks, the federal government has GAO and the Congressional Research Service. The council doesn't have, the budget office does that kind of work, but it's not really, it's not as equipped as it could be to do more of that kind of work and do the kinds of things that, Ronald, you were raising. Last year, I think we added one staffer to the budget office in order to be able to do more, but that was kind of a baby step in a direction. And I think there is a constituency on the council to significantly strengthen our research capacity so we can look into the kinds of things that you were talking about. A sub-precinct for MPD in Chevy Chase, health clinic, senior. I mean, I do think, I'm not sure that it should be in Chevy Chase. And I know there's lots of people here from Chevy Chase. If you were going to do something that was central, it's harder for Chevy Chase is on the edge. And so somewhere on Connecticut Avenue, though, I do think a senior center, I do think that there is a place for some kind of new NGO that helps serve people with the highest needs in our community. And 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 could there be an MPD substation somewhere on Connecticut Avenue? That's an intriguing idea that I would be interested in looking into. But it's not. I think it needs to be more central than Chevy Chase. I apologize to our neighbors in Chevy Chase. Not that it would be far from Chevy Chase, but more central than Chevy Chase itself. And Christina, this issue about childcare, really, really high priority for me. I think I said it before. PKEEP, and I've been talking last year, PKEEP, you're at Communicates, which is a PKEEP program. And PKEEP was in real danger last year. People didn't understand it. We were trying to find out. There was a modest cut in the budget for PKEEP. And we didn't know what it meant, and we were trying to get OSSI to tell us what it meant, and it was late in the budget process where they told us what it meant in terms of closures. We were able to raise alarm bells about it and got Chairman Mendelson to see it, and then he was able at the last minute to come up with money that saved PKEEP. And since then, I've been in conversation with OSSI about how do we protect PKEEP, the subsidy for early education and pay equity. I worry it'll be under siege in the mayor's budget, but that's a very, very high priority for me. And it's actually somewhat personal. My grandchildren are in early childhood programs, not benefiting from the pay equity, not yet the PKEEP, but I know what it means for families, know what it means for my daughter and her family, and know what it means for all of the families who benefit. So very, very much a high priority. Your points about intergenerational, I think I've and that's a really interesting idea, and I think we need to think about how might we operationalize that. I hadn't thought about it before, but I will now going forward, which is another reason, one of those reasons why this is such a good process to go through. So thank you to you all, and I will step back again.
Great. Thanks, council member. Again, everyone, if you would like to speak, raise your hand and keep it raised. I've got 4 people in the queue. Heather, I've tried to promote you, so just a flag if I ask you again, if you'll accept that. And then I see Bill, Brian, and Commissioner Gore. I see you as well, so we'll get to you. In the meantime, we have Kimberly ready. Kimberly, I know you're ready to go, so I'll let you unmute. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you, Councilmember Matt Freeman, for hosting this budget listening session. And thanks for taking the opportunity to listen to residents of Ward 3 about our budget concerns. And so I'm a resident of Glover Park, and I'm speaking to you as not only a resident, but also a small business owner. And I'm also here today to talk about Initiative 83. And I thank you for your support for that initiative. And so I wanted to just add on to some of the comments that were already made about this in terms of the popularity of this initiative and the inexpensiveness. And also to just add to that by basically saying that, it's really important for the council to be able to respect the will of the people, especially at this critical time for DC. And I think it's really important to be able to demonstrate democracy in this city. And the way to do that is to listen to the DC residents. And it's really important to do that basically as a way to basically demonstrate to the nation and other places that DC is able to make its own decisions. And one way to do that is actually to listen to the DC residents. And I also want to say on top of that, that I think part of the reason why this initiative is popular is because people in the city don't necessarily always feel like our views are being heard. And I think it's important for people who run for office to be able to listen to the people in the city. So that's all I have to say, and thank you very much. And I hope that you are successful in convincing other other members of the council to vote with you in support for funding Initiative 83.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. Next up, Margaret. Margaret, if you'd like to unmute.
Yes,
We're ready.
I've unmuted. Can you hear
Great,
me?
we can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Marguerite Pridgeon. I'm in District 3A, and I have comments and questions, but very short. First, I haven't attended a budget session in many years, but given that we are under a new federal administration, I know that DC, even with its own revenues, does get federal funding. I wanted to make sure that the DC budget process does include an impact assessment of what will happen, what they anticipate will happen with certain programs and certain funding streams coming from the federal government, since that will likely impact some of the spending. And I'm not sure if that is going to be done, but if it is done, I would like to see that assessment as part of the budget process. So if you can plug that, that would be great. Second, relatedly, I heard Council Member Fruman mention the BEPS program, and that is a program that we're trying to figure out what will happen, where we know that there are changes and we know there's a task force. In general, I think I and many of my neighbors had hoped that that would be more of an incentive-based program rather than a fine type of program where you're punished if you're not hitting targets rather than incentives for meeting targets. And I think that could make a difference in terms of ensuring that the environmental standards are moved forward without really punishing people for trying to do the right thing, but not necessarily having the resources to do it. And my last point is about crime. I think from what I've seen on the community listservs, there are a lot of property crimes that are not reported because there is a sense that people don't feel that anything's going to be done, that it's been deprioritized by MPD. That may not be true, but that's the sense that people get even when they turn in video footage or other evidence, that it's just not as high priority as other crimes, which is why people have just dealt with their insurance and not even reported it. So I do question whether even the data or the statistics on crime in DC are accurate because of that. So those are my 3 points. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marguerite. Heather, I'll now unmute you and you're free to speak when you're ready. There you go, Heather.
Thank you. I serve on an Iona Senior Services Advisory Group, and my concern is the inadequate funding for the connector card, a Visa debit card issued by the Department of Aging with transportation provided by DC Yellow Cab. An essential feature of this program is that this is a sliding scale program that most benefits low-income residents. And I'll add that a recent study done by the Department of Planning based on Census Bureau indicated a very, not surprisingly, high income level for Ward 3, but a very different result looking at the median income. So the FY24 budget into 25 included a $247,000 enhancement, thanks gratefully to Councilmember Louis George. But when I testified at the oversight hearing for DACL, the Department of Aging, last April, there were 500 people on the waiting list. There were some technical problems that Yellow Cab and DACL are trying to work through, but the reality is that there are still 600 people on the waiting list. I think this program warrants significantly more funding since it covers only 4,000 of many, many more seniors in the city. So I've 2 questions for Kevin and the council member to look into, please. How many of the 500 to 600 people on the waiting list were moved and became actual participants in calendar year 2024? And how many are projected to be moved from the waiting list into active participation in each of the quarters of calendar year 2025. The second question is, why does DACL, the Department of Aging, continue to promote in paper flyers, large events, the connector card program when no more applicants are being accepted? And that's been going on for quite some time now. So if you see a flyer and you go to the DC Yellow Cab site, it indicates no more applicants are being accepted. And I do transportation options trainings across the city, primarily across the river, and it creates tremendous confusion that people have applied and they don't hear back. Anyway, there are a number of issues that I would really appreciate the council member looking into it. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Heather. And Bill, we have you next. Bill, if you'd like to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, hi, Bill Rice. Good to see you again. I am talking about the DC Archives, now under construction at UDC. And it's a plea for more staff for the archive, excuse me, particularly for that we have the capacity for a state-of-the-art archives for the district, that it can complete the inventory of the present collection, extends its reach into the agencies, so we have the appropriate records management throughout the DC government, and that the move of the collection, which is a very complicated endeavor, because you want to keep track of everything and preserve it and be able to inventory it when you get it, that is adequately staffed. And that when the new archives opens, hopefully by July 4th, 2026, for America 250, which I know you're very interested in, Council Member, our semi-quincentennial, I hope I pronounced that right, we have a fully functioning, state-of-the-art, adequately staffed DC archives. And in that connection, I want to bring to your attention, in case you haven't seen it, in the February issue of Washingtonian, a very extensive interview with the president, Eddington, who I know you know, and I've met with him several times about the archives. And it goes into his hopes and dreams for UDC, but it does not mention the archives, which I think is really too bad, because it's going to be right there on the campus of UDC, replacing Building 41 on Van Ness Street. I close with my central plea: more staff for the DC archives. Thank you.
All right, council member, and I'll give you a chance to respond there.
Okay, great. So I guess I'll work backwards again. So Bill, I have not focused on staffing for the archives for a bit. And so would be helpful if you and the archives group could send me an email with what it is that you think is necessary for that as we move into the oversight process, because I will be an advocate for that. I think the archives, having a great DC archives is critical. You know, there's people with different opinions about the proposed site, but having great archives and having it fully staffed is super important. And so let me know what you think are the specific things that need to be done in that space. That I had not seen the article, the interview with President Eddington. I do think that UDC is something of a mission for me. I'm very optimistic about President Eddington and his leadership, what he's trying to do. I think the trends are really positive at UDC, and looking for ways to be supportive of him. I think I'm going to be meeting with him in the next week or so to talk about strategy in this budget season, because I want to help them get done what they need to get done as well. The America 250 and DC 250, I think you did it right. I'm not semi-quincentennial. So I was in high school for the bicentennial. It was giant. And I've been excited about the fact that you do the math, 1976 was the bicentennial, 2026 is the semi-quincentennial. It's going to be big. The mayor just kicked off the DC task force, which I am a member of. It gives us an opportunity to tell our story of the history of the District of Columbia, make the case for statehood, and tell the story of America through the prism of the District of Columbia. So I'm really excited about the opportunity here. We'll see what we can put together. Heather, on the connector card, I just asked Bill to send me an email with information. I had asked you to send me an email. You did. When people send me emails, I do read all of the emails that come in. There's often a deluge. And so what I do is put them in my to-do file. As I go through my emails, if there's ones that I think I need to respond and deal with, I'll put it in a to-do files if I can't do it at that moment. And Heather, that's where yours is. So it may be that you've done what I want there, but the specifics on this issue, we talked a little bit about this connector card issue. Senior transportation is kind of a complicated landscape, but it's a super important thing for us to get to be doing right and efficiently. And so help me ask the right questions on this and advocate for the right things. You may already have done that, and it's in my to-do file as something that I need to read. But if that's not what that email is, please come back to it and send me that. Marguerite, federal funding, like I am really worried about federal funding. And there's, just as one example, some Republicans in Congress are talking about removing enhanced reimbursement for Medicaid from for the District of Columbia as a way of paying for their proposed tax cuts. And enhanced reimbursement, if Medicaid reimbursement typically is 50%, the district, I believe, gets 70% reimbursement for Medicaid costs. There's other places that get as much as 90%, but we get 70%. If we snap back to 50% federal reimbursement, that would be an $800 million hole in our budget. And so what do we do? Like, I don't know that as we're thinking about the budget, we have to be cognizant of that's the kind of thing that could happen. We need to be advocating with members of Congress today, please don't do this, but there's limited sympathy for us in the majority. But that's the kind of thing we really have to be nervous about and figure out and prepare, do everything we can to avoid it, prepare for it, and be ready to respond. On BEPS incentives, there are a fair amount of incentives. It's not direct, but we, this is an incentive for compliance with BEPS, but there are incentives for things that help to comply with BEPS. I do think we need to strengthen that. I do think BEPS, we have to meet our goals. We have to be sure that as we approach it, and I think this is what the task force has been doing, that we're, to the extent anyone is punished, they should be people who are not operating in good faith. Where people are operating in good faith and trying to get there, but the path is trickier for them. We need to be figuring out how to support them to get there and avoiding punishing good faith actors. And I think that's what people are trying to do as we're going forward. crime and your um, uh, you're concerned about the numbers. I'm concerned about the numbers. I've been focused on crime issues for 15 years, from when I was an ANC commissioner to today. And I'm not sure, I don't think there's a significant difference in the tendency to report. I think, I don't think that the crimes that we see reported are the full universe, but I'm not sure that they're different, that the universe is different than over time. And uh, there is the property crime that you're talking about, which often, and you see it, cars get broken into and things like that. Uh, I see your comment in the chat. Let me try to respond to that. The theft from autos, which is like the big, well, actually, the theft from autos is a very, very big thing. Theft of autos, carjacking was a thing that spiked, but theft from autos is a thing that's been ubiquitous, and it's bad that it's a thing that happens, but it's been ubiquitous for all of the time that I've worked on these issues. The category of crime that has been the stickiest and not coming down is what they call theft other, which is shoplifting and people going into stores. And just last night, every Friday I go by Calvert Woodley and get the some cheese that's on sale, and they've been hit a couple of times. The CVS has been hit a couple of times, and uh, and we haven't been able to bring that down. And I think that the only way is more kind of walking on the street, bicycle, police presence. And that's a thing that I talk with MPD about all the time. Marguerite, I saw the comment that the incentives are in the affordable housing space. I'm thinking, and I guess we have to worry about what's going to happen with the feds, but there's increasing incentives for electrification more generally. There is an emphasis on low income. There is an emphasis on affordable housing. But if your building is having challenges, please reach out and let me know, and let us see if there's something we can do to try to be helpful. Kimberly, you brought up I-83. I talked about I-83 before, but I'll just take the opportunity to harken back. Keish, when she talked about it, said the 1.5 million is the same cost as the viewing stand that was to be there for one day and that ultimately wasn't used. When you said one day, Keish, I mean, it was under construction for a month, and it's going to be in the process of being dismantled for another month. It doesn't feel like one day to the people who work in the Wilson building. It's a 2-month thing. But fundamentally, I get the point that you're making about I-83. So with that, I will stop.
Thanks, council member. All right, Brian, I see you ready to go, and Commissioner Gore, and I see Noah has accepted as well. You guys will be next. Brian, go ahead.
First of all, council member Fruman, I just want to say thank you for the forum. I want to echo some of the comments from Keish and Catherine. I want to put on the table that there's an opportunity to expand public-private partnerships in your new remit around human resources and libraries in particular. I wonder if we could think more creatively about public-private partnerships. Certainly, the district has done that with the DC Economic Development Corporation. You look at the board of that corporation. You look at the partnership with the Urban Land Institute that is going on in Van Ness with the upcoming technical assistance program in February. All kinds of great public-private partnerships. But you've taken the lead on out-of-school programs. And this is one of the things that I think that we really need to expand is out-of-school programs for young people that look at career development, other kinds of training, for example, but could expand library services to include that. And I think Amazon has been a great partner with the Amazon Housing Trust Fund and, of course, our former former DC officials who've moved over there. I think we could do something more with Amazon in terms of digital training and partnerships around out of school training that's more digitally oriented. So that's my first ask. I do want to just ask you to consider a small piece of the budget around expanding the memorial for our former DC Ward 3 resident for 27 years, Julian Bond, at the Chevy Chase Library. You know, my own view is that we should expand the memorial for Julian Bond and celebrate the diversity we do have. You know, Bond was an icon in the civil rights movement. You know, ran for and won the Georgia State House, and he lived in Ward 3 for 27 years. And he's, you know, he was, you know, he shook Obama's hand in 2009 as president of the NAACP. Let's celebrate that diversity at the Chevy Chase Library and do more than the memorial bench that is currently there. I'm concerned that the bench is only memorial in DC apart from digital archives. And by the way, I support Bill Rice around the archives at UDC. And I think it's great, you know, that you supported the $200 million library budget for UDC in their strategic plan. That is a terrific idea. And I think we need to kind of look at that together and celebrate that. Apart from that, there's a DC Watch event, Commanders Watch event tomorrow at Deanwood in Southeast. Everybody's invited, 2 to 6 p.m. The pool's open, and love to see you there too. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Brian. Commissioner Gore, if you'd like to unmute, we're ready for you.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you, Councilmember Freeman, for having this budget discussion session. I think it's really critical to bring these discussions to the community from the council member and his staff. So thank you for that. As a commission chair for ANC 34G Chevy Chase, I want to thank all the 34G residents on here. I got to hear Brian and Ron, so your comments are definitely in the back of my mind. Couple of questions. One, from a technical aspect from the ANC, can you give me an idea when, because we normally submit budget request letters to our council members, when that should be submitted to your office, Councilmember Furman? I definitely don't want to miss it. Want to make sure I include as much as the wishes of 34G in there as possible. So can you just shoot me an email of when you would like to receive that letter from us? Secondly, you commented on the, you made a comment about a senior center in Ward 3. ANC 34G has historically supported a senior citizen center in the ward. Have not heard a lot about the realities of that. I believe there was a task force that was looking into it. Can you just give me an update of where that is, and if you are going to be including in your budget request letter funding for a center here in Ward 3? And finally, I know you and your staff know that WMATA is having its FY26 budget listening session. I'm just curious if your office will be submitting comments on behalf of the ward. In terms of Chevy Chase, we're really grateful for some of the changes that they made. And, you know, we sent you, WMATA and Councilmember Lewis George, a thank you letter for some of the changes that they made from directly listening to our residents. But we still have some serious concerns about the implementation, particularly the pickup and drop off for Knollwood Retirement Community, Ingleside Community not having direct access to Friendship Heights, and some of the lines running 30 minutes that'll affect our kids trying to get to Deal in Wilson. So I'm just curious if you guys will be submitting any comments to WMATA regarding the final push on Better Bus Network. And also curious about your thoughts on additional revenue. What do you suggest, or what is the council talking about in terms of additional revenue sources for WMATA specifically from the district? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Commissioner
Thank
Gore.
you.
And then last for this panel, we have Noah. And Noah, just before you begin, if I could just put one more plug out to everyone. If you would like to speak, just remember you can use the raise your hand function at the bottom. I see we do have a few questions in the Q&A section as well. You guys are free to use that as well for things that you do not wish to ask live. And with that, Noah, I will let you unmute. Go right ahead.
Hello, Councilmember Furman. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you about the priorities for the FY26 budget today. As a Ward 3 community member and the executive director of the Tenleytown Main Street, I just wanted to speak in support of DSLBD and the Main Street programs as you consider next year's budget. I believe that the Main Street programs provide an outsized benefit for our small business and community members. Main Street programs are able to leverage community connections and a personal approach to small business support that yields excellent results. Main Street programs nationwide report a return of investment on $18 to $1 spent. And I wanted to mention two examples from Tenleytown from this past year that I think highlight this approach. Print Space, our new print shop, was able to use a Main Street small grant of $5,000 to purchase a crucial piece of equipment, which was valued at $20,000. And it's revolutionized their services and helped their bottom line. By having this personal relationship with the owners, Main Street was able to help them strategize the best use of the funding and maximize its direct benefit. Another example is the facade design of one of our marquee small businesses, which was brokered by Main Street for a fraction of the cost using community relationships and an architectural firm with fantastic standing in our community. Main Street program also brings people to our small businesses throughout the year. Nearly 11,000 people attended the Art All Night celebration this past year, and they averaged 198 minutes of time spent at their favorite locations like City Ridge and Guapos. So they supported their small businesses when they came out. And Main Streets also build community in person and online. Apart from the generous donation of time by our board, which I know at a point in your past you were a member of our board. Thank you for that service. We had 485 volunteer hours valued at almost $25,000, which went towards Main Street programming and engaged our community members. So Tenleytown Main Street has 25,000 reads for or around the town, and our business briefs, which provide critical information to small businesses, and 51,000 in social media reach. So I know that the council has been very supportive of Main Street programs in the past. The council's enhancement for this year speaks to that support, and I want to thank you so much for this critical funding. I would just request that you continue the level of funding, including this enhancement, so that our Main Streets can continue to support small businesses in the district and in our community. I truly appreciate our work together throughout the year, and thank you for your support of the Main Street program moving forward. And please feel free to contact me with any questions or clarifications as you move through the budget process. And thank you again for all of your support.
Okay, so working in reverse order. So totally supportive now of the Main Streets. I think we are there's a huge emphasis on downtown. There is a feeling on the council like don't forget our neighborhoods, and the Main Streets are one of the ways in which we can support our business corridors in the neighborhoods. And so every year we are advocating for the Main Streets and for an increase in funding, and we certainly will do that again this year in the same way that we will for the villages. And Lisa and others who have asked about the Senior Wellness Center will be that looking for funding for that will also be a high priority. For the Main Streets, another plug for America 250 and DC 250 in 2026 all around the city. There should be lots of things that are happening that bring people into the communities. There'll be millions more tourists than at other times, and there'll be people who are curious about history. And so I would just make a plug, Noah, to you as a Main Street. Think about things you could be doing in that year that would be attractive to folks who are coming and exploring the city because of the America 250. Lisa, the Senior Wellness Center definitely, the Senior Wellness Center is stuck. So money was put in the budget. to have a task force to look at feasibility, or I'm not even, Karen is on, she's on that task force. It, it, it feels like a holding pattern, and we need to get it unstuck. We need to get a senior wellness center in Ward 3. It's Ward 3 and Ward 2 don't have senior wellness centers. All of the other wards do. We should have one. Where it goes is part of the question that's in front of that task force. But just because we have a senior wellness center doesn't mean senior programming won't be very important or shouldn't be very important in every other place. And the Around Town program, the whole idea of it was to do senior programming in rec centers and in libraries all around the ward, which would be then that much closer to residents. So there was something in their backyard. The Chevy Chase Rec Center and Library may or may not be the senior wellness center, but it sure needs to be designed in a way that that facilitates significant senior programming for a community that includes a lot of seniors. So, Mayor, I don't think that would be the natural site for the senior wellness center, but it is a natural site for capacity to do lots of senior programming. On WMATA, I had somebody reach out because they were unhappy about the bus coming on Nevada Avenue, didn't see that coming in previous iterations. And this goes to the question that you all, the folks in ANC 34G and the folks who've been active on the Better Bus thing know about WMATA's reticence to go on McKinley, because McKinley is narrow in a place and has parking on both sides of the street. And if you wanted it to go on McKinley, what would you do in terms of parking? And so that becomes a tricky kind of thing. And it's one in which it highlights that there's increases in service that everybody can get behind, but there are specifics of exactly where the buses go that are very micro. And frankly, you and your colleagues on the ANC are closer to than I am. And so I have tried to be very deferential to the ANCs, to be the front line what we have done is identified big picture issues and tried to be deferential to the ANCs in coming up with specific solutions. And that's the approach that we will be taking as we go through this process. Exactly what needs to be done to make the Knollwood and Ingleside changes happen, what needs to be done around Nevada and McKinley, I want to hear from you. But those are remain issues we will elevate. So that is that's the spirit of what we'll be doing in this next round. Funding revenue sources for WMATA. You hear people talk about an increase in the sales tax. That idea is out there in the ether. There haven't been specific conversations. I actually don't think that's going to be a big thing in this budget cycle, because you can't do it until all three jurisdictions are ready to do it, and Virginia's not going to. It's unlikely Virginia would do something significant while Glenn Youngkin is still the governor. And so I suspect it waits until there's a new governor in Virginia, and which would be next year. And then there would be hopefully all the jurisdictions would come together around a uniform way or a uniform plan. And in the meantime, for this coming year, it's that we're going to have to fill WMATA's hole in whatever way it is that we have in the past. I could be wrong on that. That could heat up, but I think that's more of a next year issue in terms of the key revenue source. The key revenue source and the strength of WMATA is so important to us for so many different reasons. um, uh, and so important to the regional economy as a whole for lots of different reasons. We actually have a, 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 a specific one, which is the plans for the Western Bus Garage were in the idea of remaking the Western Bus Garage site and remaking Friendship Heights was in the capital plan for WMATA until they ran into so much turbulence around their budget and it came out of the capital plan. We need WMATA's finances to be strengthened so that we can get to a place where we're doing really exciting things in Friendship Heights. There's a lot that's happening in Friendship Heights and it's great. But those two blocks, the block that the Western Bus Garage is on and the Lord and Taylor block, those are very, very large opportunities to do lots of different exciting things, but we can't do it until WMATA is ready to do it. Brian, the public-private partnerships in the DHS space and in the OST space, totally hear you. That I'm just getting started on this, and I'm actually using the oversight and budget process to get as educated as I can. I'd actually appreciate it if you reached out with ideas around how we might do that. I've just met yesterday with the executive director of the libraries who wanted to talk about how they fit into the OST world. So hear you on that as well. The archives at UDC, Bill Rice talked about that the president of UDC doesn't talk about the archives. And it may be that the archives have been controversial and he just doesn't want to bring up a thing that proves to be controversial. It is a big investment on the campus of UDC that fits with the mission of the university to be the archives for the state, and is something very exciting, and we need to get it done as well as possible. Julian Bond, I have had people reach out and ask that we rename Chevy Chase Park after Julian Bond, who lived close to Chevy Chase Park. And I'm supportive of that idea. That's a thing that needs to be socialized with folks in the community and folks in the ANC to see whether there's support for that idea. But I am totally, I would like to see that happen. I do think Julian Bond lived within our midst and did really, really important work. And I think that valuing that by naming something after him or raising up the things that have been done already would be a valuable thing to do. Um, and and so I hear you on that. A different thing, I'll digress for a second. Some people have raised the idea of changing the name of the Klingel Bridge to be named after Judy Heumann, who was a critical activist in the world of the rights of the disabled. You might have seen Crip Camp, where she was featured heavily. She lived right near that bridge. I'm open to that idea. Also, I'd love to see something like that bubble up from the community. Again, trying to be sensitive to the to the expressions directly from the community, but these are people who have made giant contributions, and I like the idea of honoring them. Sounds like a very exciting thing at Deanwood, and thank you for raising that. And I think with that, I will stop and um, we can turn to our next folks. I'll say I'm content to go a little bit longer. There is a memorial gathering for Jeffrey Norman that some of you may have known today that started at 11:30. So I don't want to get too far away from our noon stop. And I think we probably heard from most folks, but to my team, if we go over 10 minutes, that's okay with me.
Great, thanks,
10, 15
Councilmember. And Monte, I have you queued up and ready to go if you'd like to unmute.
Hi, great. Thank you. Hi, Councilmember Furman. Thank you so much for today's budget forum listening session. This is fantastic. It's also great to hear so many people in the community advocating for so many important things. I mean, it's just it's really great to live in Ward 3 and hear everybody chime in and participate in this way. So I want to be quick because you've already received a lot of information from me. I'm speaking today on behalf of the MacArthur High School community. We are the new high school in Ward 3 right on MacArthur Boulevard. And we have a lot of things to celebrate and be excited about. I do want to share a couple of those highlights of statistics so that people can start to hear more about us. We are in our second school year. We have about 392 students enrolled in the 9th through the 11th grade. Next year, being our third year, we will have a full contingent of 9th through 12th grade. This is our first year as a Title I high school. We have about 20 languages that are spoken at home, so we have a very diverse community of students. 25% of our students are on an IEP. We have about a little over 9% of students on a 504 plan. So again, we are supporting a lot of different learners as well as a lot of different cultures and diverse backgrounds at home. We have a really great statistic that I love to put out there is that we have about 51%. And the third term ends on Monday, so it's probably going to be higher, but we have about 51% of our students that have a GPA of 3.0 and above. And of course, because the school is a very special school with AP and pre-AP courses as our focus and core, that GPA is very much weighted. So we have a really high-performing school already out the gate with a lot of kids coming from all over the city, not just in Ward 3. And we also have a really good statistic in this dark time that we're in right now, where we're hearing a lot of things that aren't so great, but we have about 95% of our students that are in the 9th grade right now that are on track for promotion to finish high school. So we are excited about that. I wanted to say a couple of things about our budget. Councilmember Freeman, you've received the letter that I sent recently to Chancellor Farabee and his team, and we are requesting a number of things just so that we can be at our baseline functionality of a high school. It's just basic stuff. And we are so grateful and thankful that the school community is open, but we are not functioning as a baseline high school with some amenities and some facilities and some offerings for our teachers and administration as well. So things like we are requesting that we have immediately a weapons abatement equipment to open up a second entrance. Right now, we only have one entrance and we're under construction. So students are waiting outside for a very long time to get into school. That affects their first period class. They are often late and they're trickling in throughout the time of that first period class. Because we are an AP and pre-AP school, our heavy course loads are in the morning. So that's really affects the learning environment. It's quite disruptive. So we need that second weapon abatement, which is basically a magnetometer so that they can walk through the school and get in safely and make sure that everyone that stays in there is safe. We also have a recommendation and a concern about having additional security officers. That does not come out of the local school budget, actually comes out of the DCPS budget. So we really are pushing for that because as we continue to open up more floors and wings of the school, we're going to need more eyes on the different parts of the school to make sure that everyone's safe with all the various entrances and exits. If people are familiar with the site, it's the former GDS lower school. And so it's a very cool layout, but with all those nooks and crannies, we need to have more people there kind of just seeing what's going on in the building, who comes and goes. We have some very serious concerns about our library, and I know that you're now chairman of that committee. I'm so excited about that. You know how much I love the libraries and our system here in the district. But our school library at MacArthur is woefully under-resourced. we don't even have enough shelves to unbox the books that we have for our students to use as resources. The space itself is not to scale for a high school. It's really for a lower middle school size. And so we've asked for some expansions and some other amenities to make sure that we have that space available for our high school students to really be able to learn and to enrich their learning in a library space. We're asking also for an auditorium. Right now, we have a black box theater that is not being used because we just received the furniture. So we'll start to unpack that and open that up, hopefully for the coming school year. But the black box theater for the school of our size is not going to be able to help us have an opportunity to gather in a way that's a community. It does not accommodate the full complement of the school, and our gym as it stands right now doesn't accommodate any versatility for any kind of cultural or arts programming that we like to offer at the school. There's some other things around the gym that we've talked about that you're aware of. I will not take the time because I'm being very sensitive to it because you do have the very detailed letter. But I want to just put that out there for other people that are on this call, that as you think about MacArthur, we'd love for you all to advocate on our behalf as well. We have a lack of community in meeting space as well. So in the designs, as we're going forward with the renovation and the continuation of construction, we do not have community space. They have some open common areas that are in lobbies, but nothing where you can huddle with a student, nothing where you can have parent-teacher meetings that are appropriate, nothing where you can have larger faculty gatherings. So we're really concerned about that lack of design and thoughtful, intentional purpose. So we want to make sure that that's on your radar through this process. And with that, I'll kind of leave it there, but you have been very, very much upfront with us. You come and spend time at our school. You have dedicated a full staff person to really engage with us on a regular basis. So I want to thank you for that. And we want to just say that we continue to be in partnership with your office, including you as we continue to advocate for our student body and our needs. And one last thing I almost forgot. The WMATA issue has been great. I've strongly advocated for an increased bus schedule. We're still having some kinks and some hiccups here and there, but I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about locking arms on some of the intentional things for moving forward with WMATA and making sure that we're included as a school for many, many reasons to make sure that our bus schedule is very, very much on schedule because we have a pickup drop-off issue still. And with that, I will say thank you.
So I don't see anybody else, and so I'm going to respond, and then I guess Kevin, if you have other questions. I mean, first, Monty, when you say you're a supporter of the libraries, I think you're a little bit too modest. You were on the board of the libraries, and am I right that you were the chair of the board?
Yeah, I was the former chair. Yeah, I really love the DC Public Libraries.
And they're amazing, and thank you for your work on that. And the work that you've done on MacArthur is nothing short of amazing. Kevin, I texted you the pictures from, is there any chance that you can share the screen with the picture with Principal McCrae from the standing ovation?
Yes, give me just a moment while you're speaking. I'll pull that up.
All right, great. So, and on like you have laid it out in lots of detail, and I'm setting up meetings with DCPS, and your letter is a thing that I need to be reviewing with them. I hear you on we came out to see the arrival at schools. I think we missed you by a little bit. I think you were coming. It happened to be a day where attendance was lower because it was after a holiday, or I can't remember exactly why it was, but we did see some of the issues. I mean, a lot of buses came, the kids get off the bus and behave like kids and cross the street in the way that I crossed the street when I was 16 years old. And so figuring out how it is that we get that better, and the magnetometer, the issue is, I get it, it's important. We'll come out again and watch it. we didn't talk about the name change. So here's at the standing ovation awards for DCPS, that in the red, I don't know, velvet jacket is Principal Harold McRae, who is, for those on this call, unbelievable.
He is phenomenal. He is not allowed to leave. I'm going to be there for 8 years between my children, so he's not allowed to leave. He's phenomenal.
Yeah. And he's rocking that red velvet jacket. You gotta love that. Between he and I, and you, Crawford, he's the performing arts teacher.
Dr. Newbold. Dr.
Newbold, who won Teacher of the Year.
He's exceptional.
And then obviously me and Phil Mendelson. So, and I was able to catch up with Principal McRae there. He said that there were all kinds of people at the school looking at different things, and I think there may be some response to your letter, but let's catch up to make sure that I'm supporting you in the things that you guys are looking for. I do think you have done a phenomenal job of getting folks motivated. You can take it. Thanks. I wanted to show off the red.
No,
velvet.
it's a great partnership. Matt, it really is. You've been fantastic, and we're just so happy about it. But we do need to push the needle and push a little bit harder about getting these things done, because we are not meeting ed specs, which is the most important thing for us to keep saying.
Yeah, and I worked on the renovation of what was then called Wilson, now Jackson Reed, and the nooks and crannies issues, these safety issues, and making sure that there can be eyes on kids. Like, we focused on that a lot, and it is a really challenging building. So I hear you on the full list. Let's stay together and try to make sure we get to the best possible. So I think with that, Kevin, if there were questions in the chat.
There was one that might be a helpful clarification, because I know we had some differing information come out from the media about the rules for hearings, and the question was a clarification, and I'll read what Catherine wrote. Can you please clarify something I think came up earlier in the comments? We heard Councilmember Lewis George and Allen protested Chairman Mendelson's effort to limit the number of people who can testify, and I think that was reported in the media. So I think, Councilmember, if we could just clarify where we stand on that rule now about limiting or not limiting the number of people to testify, and what you said about that earlier.
Yeah, so Chairman Mendelson included something in the rules that would give discretion to the chair, the rules for the committee of the whole, that would give discretion of the chair to limit the number of people who testified on behalf of an organization. And it grows out of, I referred to it before, that we have had settings where 30 people come and they say the same thing, and that is productive, but on the other hand, and it's not good for the cause. But I think the feeling was, yeah, but we don't want to limit people's ability to come and be heard. And so that proposed change to the rules for the committee of the whole that would have allowed discretion to the chair to cut off testimony from if too many people from the same organization were testifying, was not adopted. So it was raised. Councilmember Allen raised questions about it. Councilmember Lewis George raised questions about it. Chairman Mendelson backed off.
Great. Thanks, Councilmember.
So I'm assuming that there are no more other questions. Thank you to Kevin for putting in that Principal Saab Brown at Jackson Reed won the Principal of the Year also. And you could think, we're talking about a teacher at MacArthur and a principal at Jackson Reed. We did great. We did not dominate, and it was so heartening to see the successes of different schools around the city, the amazing things that they are doing. H.D. Woodson won the award for community outreach for a high school. As a high school, that's a pretty amazing accomplishment, and that's the kind of thing that we, as a city, really want to see happen. We need our schools in Ward 3 to succeed, but we need our schools all across the city to succeed. I think I want to close by thanking everybody who participated today for your input. I really appreciate it. And more than your input, because so many of the people who came forward and offered ideas have been active in so many different ways, and really, really appreciate all of the work that you're doing. We're kind of coming into the chute, and the pace is going to pick up, and it's going to be intensive. This isn't the only opportunity to have input into our response to the budget. Please reach out. I'm sure with many of you we'll be in close contact as we go forward. But this has been really, really helpful for me and my team to hear how people are thinking about different issues and what their priorities are. And again, thank you very much for joining us.
All right, great. And with that, I will close the meeting. Thanks, everyone.
And before you do that, Kevin, one thing, for those who, this will be posted, right? So we're making a recording.
I should say, I put that information in the chat. I'll read it out loud. Thanks for flagging, council member. So everyone, we will be posting a link to this meeting. We did record today. So that information will be both on our website, mattfrumanward3.com, as well as on our YouTube page, which is at CM Fruman. So you can find both of those there. And also I will just put a plug in. You can stay updated and sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter at mattfrumanward3.com. You can also follow our social channels at CM Fruman. And then I'll just flag one more thing in that chat is if you didn't get a chance to share today, there are other comments. You can email us at frumanoffice@dccouncil.gov or call us at 202-724-8062. Again, that information is in the chat. Thanks, council member.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Kevin. Great job, team.
Great. Thanks all. Have a great day.